Did I ever tell you that when I worked with Noah Wiley once, and he was off in the, this is before he did, what was it?
ER.
ER, before he did ER. And on a show, this in my old days, I haven't spent 20 plus years, but he would stand in back and jump up and down and up and down, and everyone looked at him like he was crazy. But that's how he got his blood going, and he got centered. And I went like, man, what a smart kid. And then he just every time he worked, he was always focused, always ready to go, always prepared. Whereas other actors, oftentimes on that particular set, yeah, it was tough. I'm not going to mention any names, but one of them came out of his trailer all drugged out, and then the scene, my big scene,
Oh no.
got cut. And as a writer, I looked at that and I went, "Oh my God, I make no sense anymore." And I became an extra in a movie I had to
Oh,
go.
awful.
Yes.
I worked with Noah a little bit many years ago too,
Mhm.
and found him to just be a delightful
Oh,
person. And
absolutely.
speaking of actors, different processes, I mean, it's a wide range, right?
Hmm.
But I'll just quickly say I did a movie many years ago with Marissa Tomei and Sam Rockwell,
Uh-huh.
and
Good
they're,
company.
they couldn't be more. They're both excellent, right? They're both like at the they're A-list actors. They're incredible.
Hmm.
Their processes couldn't be any more different.
Uh-huh.
Sam's process is like, yeah, he kind of gets to know the words on the page, but he's like, okay, I got it. I'm going to go in there and I'm going to live it.
Uh-huh.
Marissa, you'd see her like on the porch studying, and she would do it with the same note to every word every single
Uh-huh.
time. She would record it into a tape recorder and then
Uh-huh.
listen back to it so that the notes would all be
Wow.
exactly the same. And on the
Hmm.
first day Sam worked, he was on this movie, the person working against it, or working not against him, but working in the scene with him, that he was acting with, was not a well-known actor. You could tell he was nervous, like it was his
Hmm.
first scene, and for some reason the director decided to do close-ups first. Usually you do a wide shot. So, and it was this guy, this new actor's close-up for. It must have been some lighting thing. I can't remember why.
Hmm.
But so Sam was right there for him and could tell the actor was nervous and that he
Hmm.
would, hadn't felt he did a good job. And
Right.
so Sam kept in the scene and he wouldn't let the director yell cut,
Uh-huh.
because he knew that he could be there for this guy.
Hmm.
And that was such a generous moment to
Oh, I
see this
love that.
actor, like, just who again barely knew his own lines, because that's not his thing. I mean, it's not that he didn't know his lines, but
I
he's
know.
not a memorizer that way. He knows the scene, he knows kind of the beats to hit, and the lines will be a little loosey goosey. The thing about Marissa is when she comes in, all those notes, they go
Uh-huh.
away. They go away.
Yeah.
That's just your starting point. It's like an improvisational musician who comes in, and yes, you know the notes of the melody, but you might do a little flourish here, a little flourish there. So there's my Marissa and Sam story.
Oh, I love it. I love it. It's like when I was an actor, what I would do, and then we're gonna. This is all gonna be cut out, but I enjoy these conversations. I would go over it and over it and over it. So let's say I did a play. I literally could just go through every line in the play back to back to back to back, so that by the time I got on stage, I knew him that well. I would just go
Hmm.
over him and over and over him. So when I got there, I didn't have to think about him anymore. So
Yeah.
that was my process.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to have to start fresh. I love that we were throwing names around, but it had nothing to do with frickin' real estate. So, so let's. I'm here with Gabe Cowan, who happens to be a very good friend of mine as well. We started out the way we met was interesting, is because your wife found me, which thank you to her again. I'm pretty sure that she's the one that did all the research on me, and I went over to Rubio, right?
Yes. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
wait, you think, am I remembering this wrong?
I don't know that you're remembering it wrong. I do feel like Yelp was involved or
Uh-huh.
something like that. Um, and I do remember you coming over. I mean, I would have been dating her at the time, so that's really
Right.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a great house. And at the end of the interview, you said, "Hey, yeah, I'd like to hire you." And I went like, "I love guys like you because you got what I was saying." And so I just want to say this, that as a friend, I really appreciate you because I love your heart, especially. But giving me the opportunities, it helps me support my family. So I just, you've done it repeatedly, and I thank you for that. I mean,
Well,
really.
You raised your family in that first meeting. I think I even got to see some pictures of the kids
Ah,
who are no longer little kids.
yeah,
Um,
the strategy
and
of mine.
and I do remember that we had met with a couple people, and there is a tendency not to trash your business, but it's hard, right? When you're a salesperson and you got to be in front of people, you're in front of strangers, and there's a
Hmm.
performative aspect, and I think it's hard for a lot of people. Car salespeople run into this too, where like it's hard to just ground yourself in your own authenticity,
Right.
and you are connected to your authenticity. It's part of who you are as a salesperson and as a human. And so I do remember being stricken by that. And that's why in the moment, when and there's no reason to wait. Like, oh, we're gonna meet with the other three people. Like, why? This is the guy. But that authenticity really stuck with me, and I think it's part of why we're friends.
Yeah. Well, I thank you. Really appreciate that very much. So, if you wouldn't mind, let's start with Rubio because I thought that was a very interesting property that had its own challenges. I remember especially the way the deal came together, so we could talk about that if you like.
Mm-hmm.
If you feel, I mean, what are the biggest challenges that we felt that we experienced in your perception, and what did we do to fix them? Just so we can kind of share that with people.
Well, I remember that the obviously we're trying to get the highest price, and there was one couple that came in at the highest price, but they had some credit issues,
Right.
and they weren't able to get the final piece of credit that they need for the loan. And
Hmm.
they reached out, and you asked me if I would agree to sit and speak with them and hear them out about the credit issue. And we met at your office.
Which we
My
rarely do, by the way.
Yeah, it seemed you definitely made that clear to me at the time. You were like, "Listen, this is really not unusual, but I think it's something worth you hearing and considering." You didn't push me on it at all.
Right.
It was just a matter of would you be willing to listen to these people. My mother came with me. I don't know if you remember
That's
that.
right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And my mother, who's like one of the most empathetic people in the world, I'm really glad that she was there because she helped me think through and process the sort of the up and downsides.
Yeah, well, what worked, what I loved about what you did is that you were open to the ideas because I met the couple and I sincerely liked them and I liked the agent. But I remember looking at their credit and I'm going, oh my gosh, there's some great reasons why this happened. And a lot of it was out of their control. And so when you heard that, that made you open to talking to them because you thought, the credit is obviously not reflecting them. So when we got in there, I thought it was interesting because the only way to do it was to do a seller financing piece, which wasn't being done that often. But you listened, you heard, and then you chose to do that. So it could have been a disaster, but instead it turned out to be this huge blessing for this family because you allowed it to happen. And so I just thought that was great. I think they paid it off early too, didn't they?
They did pay it off early. I was going to say that. So there was several pieces of the way that deal worked that I thought were nice. For one, we were supporting a very nice couple who had run into some understandable hardships that
Yes,
really didn't sound like any fault of their own and just was like
exactly.
a black mark on their credit report. And so, of course, I think we all can empathize with that. I mean, I think there was some like $50 thing that I didn't even know I hadn't paid that was
Uh-huh.
like dinging my credit forever. And you're like, why don't you $50? Like, what are you
Right.
talking about?
I'll pay it.
Yeah, right. Uh,
Mhm.
and then also because part of it was as a loan, I ended up making more money because there was I think a 5% or something like that on the loan, and they paid it off early, so it all worked out.
Yeah, I thought that was great, and I love stories like that because it could have gone one way, but instead this family. I still, whenever I see the agent thanks me, and I'm going like, look, all I did was facilitate, but it was the seller, your heart, and being open to it, and then the buyers, they were just so sincere. It was really hard not to just want to help them, and it just everyone won. So
Mhm.
anyway, I thought that was great. I love that story.
It worked out great.
Yeah, absolutely. And we went through, did you have anything else you want to talk about with that particular property? Because we have another pretty exciting one coming up.
I mean, maybe just as I don't know how relevant this is to your audience, but but it was my first home. I bought it in I think 2002, and it was very much a bachelor pad. A super great house down like a private driveway with a nice sized lot. But it was set, and I built a soundproof recording studio. We used to play until 4 o'clock in the morning there. But as you get early, you're like, okay, I want a family, and I fell in love with the person, and she had a daughter that I was kind of marrying into, and it was time to get out of the bachelor place and onto the place that I think we're about to now describe.
Yeah, yeah. And so I had forgotten about that. One more thing I really liked about you too is that everything we talked about to prep the house, to get it to the point where we could shoot it the way we wanted to and get the biggest audience, you were so open. There were things that you said no because of this, but at the end of the day, you chose all the right things to get where we needed to go. And so clients like you are just, it's you're ideal. I'll just say that. So interesting. We ended up going to, we got you into, oh gosh, there's so many stories associated with this. It was James Ingram's house. Mm-hmm. And so I remember when we going into it, it was complicated. Going out was complicated, but you guys just stayed so calm the whole time. I couldn't even believe it. And so is there anything in particular, I can think of a few, is there anything in particular that you think like, oh my God, that was a crazy thing that happened, but we were able to work it out?
Well, just to set it up. So my wife and I, so I've now sold my house. We have some money. We're living in an apartment with our daughter. And we're looking at houses, and it turns out that we had never looked at houses before together. Mm-hmm. We have very different needs.
It turns out.
What she wants is totally different than what I want. We looked at all of these places where I'm like, this is perfect. Are you kidding? It was not. She's like, heck no. And same vice versa, where I'm like, are you crazy? Like, where am I going to play music? So we both had our needs. So we wrote those down. That was a good process. So we go to this one house in Brookside, which is right next to Hancock Park. Mm-hmm. And the house was a mess. I mean, it was a total pack rat, like boxes from the ceiling, floor to ceiling. The kitchen was like covered in like grease. Mm-hmm. But both of us walked in there and we were like, yep, this is it. It had a great lot. It had a great backyard. There was, plenty of space. The bones of the house were great. And we could just see what we wanted to do with it. And the price wasn't crazy. And I mean, prices have doubled now.
Yes.
Then, but it really felt like a good possibility. And so I remember calling you up and saying, we agreed on something. we need to make this work. It's the one house in Los Angeles that's going to work for both of us.
Right. I remember at one point there was a couple of houses you'd send over to me, and I would be like, do you not even know your fiance or your wife? Do you not even know her? You really want to do that? But at some point, you just step back and you go, we're going to look at everything. And eventually what happened. So that was great.
Yeah. And I do remember some of the detail. You may remember some that I don't remember. But I do remember we made an offer. I can't remember exactly how the counter piece worked. But I do remember that... maybe you can help me get into I do remember that we ended up negotiating that sadly, and I think it broke both of our hearts, James was ill. And so we ended up negotiating with his wife. And I can't remember. I do remember. It was in the inspection. I remember. This was great. You have an incredible fleet of people at your disposal.
Yeah.
And so because we had sold a house together, but I bought the house before I knew you. So now we had sold a house together. Now we're buying a house together for the first time. You bring your people in. One of those people is this inspector who is a sort of a relatively small woman who... Annette, she's got a great personality.
Yes.
And I remember her saying to me, she's like, look, I'm going to put the report together. I'm going to do all of it. But she's like, this is a great house. And it made me feel so confident because the house was not new. I think it was built in 1923 or something like that. And that was part of her point is like, it's been through earthquakes and it's been through all these, standing here. It's this great old home. But in the inspection, one of the things we discovered was that the garage, which I was planning on turning into my studio, basically had to be torn down. It was all redwood, and if you put your hands on the wood would just crumble right in your hands.
That was a mess.
Right. It was a mess. And so we looked into just what is it going to cost to like, I don't think we even went back with like, we have to rebuild it. I think it was literally what's the cost to demo it and haul it all away and like have clean space there. And it wasn't cheap. It was like 50 or 60 grand or something like that. This is my memory of it.
Yeah.
Maybe you
that
can.
Sounds about right. No, that sounds very.
And so we went and we were like, look, we're not trying to do like a land grab here. We're just trying to like make the, this is something that we're going to be required to do. We can't have the garage falling on our family. And there was, I think, a couple of days of pause because maybe James was sick. There was something happening where I feel like you and I were going, is this going to work out? Is she going to say no? Is she, this is a pretty good deal. It's a pretty great house, but this is a reality. The next family is going to run into this too.
Exactly.
And I was in San Francisco with a friend of mine when I got the call from you. And you were like, she agreed. We're doing it. It's done.
I'll say this. What made it work, because it would have been an absolute nightmare, what made it work is that you made a reasonable request. Now, this is a very old house, 100 plus years, I think, right? It's like, it's got that range.
It's like 100 years, yeah.
Uneven floors, mold, plumbing issues. I mean, the list was extensive. You said, we're not going to ask for any of that because that was the expectation going in, but this is just so far above what we expected. So that's how it ended up going down. And I was really impressed with the way you made it was reasonable. And that is one of the reasons I think it came together. Mm-hmm. Plus you had a ton of heart about it. You didn't even want to ask, but at some point it was like, if we don't get this, it doesn't make sense for us anymore.
I do remember feeling so conflicted because we heard that James was sick and like, we don't know one, and I didn't know James, but his kids went to the same high school I went to. There's like some overlap,
right?
And obviously, I'm a fan, so it made me really sad to ask. But I just felt like now we have to, and I think you're right. Like we may get into the selling of that house too.
Yeah,
but we have been hit sometimes with people who haven't asked for things that felt reasonable,
right?
And so you want to be golden rule. Right. So I agree with you. I think we did come in with something that was legitimately fair.
100%.
And I remember being worried about it because I didn't want to lose the house, but it worked out.
Yeah, it definitely did. And then, which leads us to when you went to sell the property. I thought I loved the way you guys handled that again too, is that we made sure that we were very clear on anything that needed to be disclosed. Mm-hmm. And do you remember there was a situation where the deal could have fallen apart again? Do you remember what I'm talking about with the?
Yeah.
Okay, then go. I'm gonna let you go.
Yeah. So there was actually a similar thing on the selling of the house as the buying of the house. There were some things we knew, and then there were some things that were a surprise to us when they did inspections. Also, COVID was a piece of this. This is like maybe 8 months into COVID or something like that. I'm living in Martha's Vineyard. I mean, at first I was in Los Angeles. We set up the house together. You came in and with your vision and your kind of, talent said, I think we should do this, this, and this. We brought in a bunch of your people. We fixed some things up.
Yeah.
And we kind of like used mostly our furniture, but did some accenting to take the pictures and made the house look great. You came up with this concept of calling it the music house. Or something like that.
We did a PR piece on it.
Yeah, which was great. And it is like a historic house. And not only did James Ingram, now I'm not James Ingram, but I'm a musician too, but the person before James Ingram that owned that house, which there was only one owner before him, and it was the conductor, the head of the LA Philharmonic.
Exactly.
So this has been a music house since forever. So, but we didn't think, or I didn't think, to like pre-inspect the house to see what other people would see. And so when the buyers came in and they did their inspections, they found that underneath the downstairs bathroom there was like a leak in an O-ring, and the leak had been there for a long time, and there was like some mold in there. And so that was like, oh gosh, like, okay, what's that going to cost to fix? How long is it going to take to fix it? That felt like in the realm of like, we didn't know about that, we didn't disclose it, and we want to be reasonable, right? So that felt like something we had to take care of. This is my memory of it anyway.
Yeah.
But then there was also this kind of unpermitted but awesome, that garage space that we mentioned earlier that was a teardown. We made it awesome. We made it like 9 or 10 foot ceilings, and it was a big open space, and it was a recording studio and had nice doors to the outside. But we did tell them we not only did you tell them in the kind of advertising of it and the
Right.
MLS and all of that stuff, but you also told them, you spoke it to them. They were very transparent. And my memory is that they came back with something being like, oh, we're going to have to like tear this down and da da da. And they asked for, I don't remember the number, but it was certainly six figures. It was really high. And it for me, it almost, I don't like that. That felt unjust. It felt like slippery and tricky. And I remember I almost shut the deal down.
Right.
And you talked me down off the ledge. You said, look, let's go back to, the worst that they can do is say no. Like at the end of the day, this is a good price, and we've shown it to other people, and this seems like a really good deal. It seems like a good house for them. It seems like a good deal for you. Let's just see what they say. And we basically went back and we were like, absolutely not, with a pretty firm no.
Right.
And they completely capitulated.
Well, what happened too is when it was unreasonable, you wouldn't do it. When it was reasonable, then you would do it. So you actually spelled out, this is what we think is truly reasonable. And you're talking about the golden rule. So this is the way we think we need to be treated. If not, then we're willing to walk. And you did that, but you brought back. So I loved your approach, because we had to deal with, the sewer line was mostly original too.
Right.
So there's a bunch of things that were happening with the house. But the thing is that we had just like over disclosed, really. We had talked about the garage, the conversion not being permitted, but being done in a workmanlike manner, et cetera. We disclosed everything. So why are you asking for it? So yeah, I totally agree with you. So that deal could have fallen apart, but no. You stayed calm.
Yeah.
Good man. Is there any other real estate stories you can think of that you want to share? Any other challenges or?
I can't. I mean, we'll see what the future holds.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
I look forward to the next music house.
Yes. That really, to me, I actually use that as a background. And when I'm in my networking group, I have the music house behind me, because there's such a great story there. I really enjoy that.
Yeah.
And
I do have one thing to add to that.
Sure.
The woman who bought the house, her children now go to my children's school.
Oh, you're kidding?
I don't know her, but I do know that they're in different grades. I do know that she goes to school, and they went in and they like gutted the whole house, and they tore it down to those really strong, awesome bones, and they've completely rebuilt it, but I think kept the original shape of it, which is nice given that it's got this history.
Oh, that's great. Hopefully they kept some of the authentic, some of the touches. Hopefully
they kept like a jar of asbestos. Yeah.
Oh. So, that was interesting too, because you remember, trying to remember how it went down, where we had to bring the mold inspectors in, and that was a process. And so, because I think the way it went down was one of their inspectors thought that there was mold or asbestos or something. It's an old house. There's always going to be something in the house. And they were setting up all sorts of different, different, what do you call them? You weren't there because you were in Martha's Vineyard. But the process of inspecting the house was just really impressive. And at the end of it, they realized actually the house is a lot better than they thought. So thank goodness for that. I'm sure there's got to be some sort of cause or charity or something that's close to your heart. Would love to have you share that, because then we can make a little clip and then we can highlight it for you.
Great. Yeah, I've been involved with an organization called Inside Out Writers for about a dozen years now. We are an organization that teaches kids who are in prison writing and poetry, and it is the most consistently authentic and emotional experience I've ever had. You go into these writing circles, and there's usually a prompt. The kids are sitting there, they're very excited because we're giving them donuts or cookies or whatever, but they're also there to write. And usually they're given a prompt, and there's one rule, which is that you have to be honest, you have to be authentic.
Mm-hmm.
And these kids read their writing, and you just cannot believe the power, the impact of the words and the way they express
Mm-hmm.
themselves. And then they get out, and they're part of a community through Inside Out Writers, and it's extraordinary. Rand did a study, and 86% fewer kids recidivate than kids who go through these programs than kids who don't. So, I mean, it's a remarkable program. Certainly none of us want to be defined by our worst moment, and
Right.
I don't think we want to
Definitely not.
let anybody else be defined by that either. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And it's called Inside Out Writers.
Inside Out Writers.
Great. Wonderful. So we'll have Kia reach out to you to get the website, or maybe that's it, but we'd love to be able to have that so that we can, and then of course you're welcome to use, the clips however you want.
Fantastic.
All right. Anything else you'd like to share, or are we good to go?
I think we're good to go. Yeah.
You held up really well considering that you've got this headache. My
I
God.
appreciate that. Oh my God.
Yeah. Can you imagine if
Now I'll get to go cry.
Yeah, now you get to cry. Yeah, you can tell your wife I made you cry. When I interviewed, hey,
You
Kia,
make 60 look good, man. That's crazy that you're 60. You make 60 look good.
oh, well, I appreciate that. I can't even believe it myself. It's